This is the second in our series of videos to address some of the feedback that we got from our workshop at the Super Conference just last week. And this one is a particularly good one because it's shown up on quite a few of the feedback forms that were given back to us. And what people want to know is, what are your tips and methodologies for dealing with found work? And of course, we're talking in the midst of our turnaround. So, there isn't any black and white answers here. I'm sure everybody realizes that, but there is approaches that can improve the likelihood of our success. So the first thing is, let's build preparedness right into our plan, right? Like, we want to schedule all of our inspection work as close to the beginning of the event as possible. And when we have high probability risk areas, those should be our number one priority, that we get into those vessels right away. Also, prepare from a materials perspective. You for sure going to want to have tray lockers on site for, the various different tray types that you're going to be dealing with. You might want to put some steel in hand, both plate steel and possibly maybe you've got a history of having a problem in a particular separator vessel, and you've had to do flush patching on that vessel in emergencies in the past. So maybe we're going to roll a little plate just so that we're ready for this. The next tip is work your risk registry. Like, really put some time way up front, back at T-minus 20. Let's do the T-minus 20. Let's really work the risk registry on this. Let's make sure that we're considering all the things we need to consider. So make sure you bring in all the stakeholders. Particularly, we want to be talking to operations and operations engineering on this one. So has there been any significant process changes? Because process changes can result in metallurgical response changes. Has there been any changes in quality of feedstock? For instance, I know that if a gas plant that was built to run like a 3.5% H2S to 0.5% CO2 concentration were to see a sudden quality shift where it was suddenly CO2 at 2.5% and H2S at 0.5%, there will be significant metallurgical effects to that involved there. I know this because I've lived through it. So make sure that we've talked to everybody. Make sure that we look at the existing on-stream TML data. Try to predict where our highest probabilities are going to be and what our most likely surprises are going to be. When the inevitable happens, though, the first thing to do is take a deep breath. There's so much stuff gets done in the passion of the moment when we're in turnaround. So let's make sure, do we even need to do this work now? Or is it possible it can wait to the next, opportunity with this piece of equipment? So if it's physically able to restart and it's legal to restart, can we extrapolate our run time, how much time we have left, that we would still be considered legal, and compare that to when the next opportunity that we can get at this equipment is. And, that might even be an opportunity that we're going to be willing to pull forward just a little bit if necessary, because you see what I'm getting at here. If we plan and schedule this work, the impact is going to be far less than if we just do it now in the passion of the moment. So let's take a look at our past inspection data on this. Have we been seeing a pattern of wear? How bad was it last time? How much did we lose this time? How much does that leave us left? You're getting the idea where we want to go. We want to determine, if it's a case of lost material, we want to determine what our rate of loss is. So typically, in my experience, applying this kind of scrutiny to found work right when it comes into the office, I typically see 50% or more found work removed right off the plate when I apply this kind of diligence to it. However, for the remaining work that we are going to have to do First, we're going to be very grateful that we found this work right at the beginning of the outage, but we're going to need some expedient decision making. That's another thing that should have been talked about way up front. Your steering team, whoever's involved in approving work, they need to be prepared to make expedient, timely decisions. And we also need to make sure that we get our engineering packages quickly. So best practice in that is to actually have a pre-decided quick-acting work team. Best practice to have a quick-acting work team on night shift and on day shift. That team should have began the preparations for our engineering work package the minute the found work was announced, before we even got to the rest of this stuff if it happened in the middle of the night, because it's okay if they end up planning work and we don't use it, but we don't want to have any delays if we end up having to do this work. Another good practice is for the operations engineering department to have a selection of, I used to call them shelf-ready work packages. Like, you know, there are certain types of things in any given facility that have a higher probability of turning up on our found work. Those things we should be pre-prepared for, with packages, with materials, and with a readiness to proceed. Now, one of the other practices can be a little bit more controversial, but I'm used to working in call them senior facilities. And the older your facility is, let's face it, the more of this type of thing you're going to have to deal with. I have always believed that it is good forward thinking to allow the contractor to have some additional headcount, specifically so that if I get into this kind of bind, I can pull craft power that I already have on site without it having massively negative effects on other work that's already been scheduled. So there'll be a bit of a politics in there, whether you're allowed to do that or not, but just understand that trying to staff up in the midst of a turnaround, well, maybe some of you had different experiences with that than me, but I've never found that to be a successful way to approach things. So that's what I have is, you know, when it comes to found work, be prepared, be realistic. And one last thing, don't let people do the known found work thing, okay? If you know that you're gonna have refractory repairs in the reaction furnace because you've never ever gone in there and not had refractory repairs in the reaction furnace, don't plan to find that work. Just go ahead and plan it. Just go ahead and bring in the materials, right? Like, don't set yourself up for failure. Materials that don't get used, that's a small cost to pay. You have a nice day, and I'll talk to you again in a few more days after I get a chance to, you know, scrutinize some of these other brilliant feedback comments that we got. Peace out.